After I betrayed my husband, he never touched me again. Not once. For 18 years we slept under the same roof, smiled at the same family dinners, held the same grandson, and let everyone believe we were still husband and wife. Then, after a routine checkup, a doctor pointed at a dark line on my scan and said, "Mrs. Carter, who performed this surgery on you?" I laughed because I thought she had opened the wrong file. Then I saw my husband's face when I asked him about it. And I understood. The past had not stayed buried. It had been living inside my body the whole time. My name is Helen Carter. I was 58 the year my life cracked open for the second time. The first time was 18 years earlier, when my husband, Richard, found me by the lake with another man. His name was Adrian. He taught music at the same high school where I taught English. He was gentle, charming, and 5 years younger than me. He remembered tiny things. How I took my coffee, which poems made me pause, which songs I hummed when I thought no one was listening. At 40, I was old enough to know better. I was also foolish enough to confuse attention with love. Richard and I had been married for 22 years by then. We had one son, Daniel, who had just left for college. The house became quiet after he moved out. Too quiet. For years, I had told myself that peace was the same thing as happiness. Richard went to work, came home, fixed things around the house, paid bills, watched the evening news, and fell asleep in his chair. He was not cruel. That almost made it worse. There was no villain in my home, no shouting, no broken plates, no reason I could point to and say, "This is why I was lonely." I was simply lonely. And Adrian noticed. One afternoon, he stood in my classroom doorway holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "You always stay late on Thursdays," he said. I thought someone should know. That sentence was nothing. But to a woman who had felt invisible for years, it sounded like music. We started talking after school. Then we took walks. Then I lied to my husband about staff meetings that did not exist. I told myself nothing physical had happened. That was the first lie. The second lie was that emotional betrayal did not count. The third lie was that I could stop whenever I wanted. One Saturday, I told Richard the first had a teacher workshop. Instead, I met Adrian at the lake outside town. We sat on an old wooden bench near the water. He talked about leaving teaching to write music. I talked about the girl I used to be before marriage, bills, parent-teacher meetings, and grocery lists swallowed her whole. Then he took my hand. I did not pull away. A voice behind me said, "Mom." I turned. Daniel stood there, home from college, pale with shock. Richard stood beside him. My husband did not yell. He did not run toward Adrian. He did not even look surprised. He only looked tired. That was the first time I understood that silence could be louder than rage. "Get in the car," he said. The ride home felt endless. Daniel sat in the back seat with his jaw locked. Richard drove with both hands on the wheel. I kept saying his name, but he never answered. When we got home, Richard told Daniel to go upstairs. Then he sat across from me at the kitchen table. "How long?" he asked. "Richard, I'm sorry." "How long?" "3 months," I whispered. "But I swear it wasn't." "Don't." One word. Flat. Final. I started crying. I said I had been lonely. I said I had been stupid. I said I never meant to destroy our family. Richard listened as if I were a stranger explaining a traffic accident. Then he said, "You have 2 choices." I looked at him through tears. "We divorce now. Daniel finds out exactly what happened, this town finds out, your school finds out, and we split everything by law." I could barely breathe. "Or," he continued, "we stay married until Daniel is stable. We attend family events. We act normal in public. But inside this house, we are no longer husband and wife." "Richard, please." "No," he said. "You wanted to give your heart to someone else. So keep it. I don't want it anymore." That night, he carried his pillow into the guest room. I thought he would come back after a week. Then a month passed. Then a year. Then 18. People think the opposite of love is hate. It is not. Hate still looks at you. Hate still asks questions. Hate still wants something from you. Richard gave me something worse. Politeness. He said, "Excuse me," when passing me in the hall. He said, "Thank you," when I handed him salt. If I was sick, he left medicine on the counter but never asked how I felt. At family gatherings, he played his part perfectly. He would place a hand on my shoulder when someone took a photo. He would smile when neighbors said, "You two are marriage goals." He would cut turkey, pour wine, and ask Daniel about work. Then we would come home, the door would close, and his face would go blank. Daniel saw everything. Of course he did. Children always see what parents think they are hiding. At Christmas that first year, I tried to put mashed potatoes on his plate. He moved the plate away. "Don't," he said. I froze. Richard did not correct him. That hurt more than if he had. Years passed. Daniel graduated, got married, and had a little boy named Noah. When Noah was born, I thought maybe the baby would thaw something in our house. For a while it almost did. Richard adored that child. He built Noah a wooden rocking horse in the garage. He taught him how to plant tomatoes. He let him sit on his lap and press the buttons on the old radio. Sometimes when Noah laughed, Richard laughed too. And because I was desperate, I mistook that sound for hope. One evening after Noah's 5th birthday party, I found Richard washing dishes. I stood beside him and dried the plates. "We did well today," I said softly. He nodded. "Richard," I said, "do you ever think we could try again?" The faucet kept running. He turned it off. Then he looked at me. "Helen, you don't want to try again," he said. "You want the punishment to end." I had no answer. He placed the last dish in the rack. "The problem is, I'm not punishing you anymore." His voice was calm. "I'm just empty." That sentence stayed with me for years. In 2025, the school district offered free health screenings for retired teachers. I went because it was routine. Blood work, ultrasound, bone density, the usual things women my age talk about while pretending not to be scared. The nurse said I looked fine. The gynecologist did not. Dr. Marlowe was a woman with kind eyes and a careful voice. She studied the scan for too long. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "have you ever had pelvic surgery?" "No." "Are you sure?" I laughed a little. I think I would remember surgery. She did not laugh. She turned the monitor toward me and pointed at a small pale mark. "This is scar tissue." My mouth went dry. "That's impossible." "It's old," she said. "Very old. I recommend you ask your family if there was a procedure you don't remember. Sometimes records are incomplete, especially from emergency situations." Emergency situations. The words opened a door in my mind. 18 years earlier, after Richard found me with Adrian, I had gone through weeks of panic. I could not sleep. I barely ate. One night I took sleeping pills. Not to die. I told myself that later. Just to stop thinking. I remembered waking up in a hospital room. Richard sitting in a chair. Daniel crying in the hallway. Richard told me I had scared everyone. He said the doctors pumped my stomach. He said I should be grateful I was alive. I remembered a dull pain low in my abdomen. I had blamed it on cramps. Now, sitting in Dr. Marlowe's office, my hands began to shake. I went home without calling first. Richard was in the study sorting old tax files. "We need to talk," I said. He looked up. The moment I said, "Did something happen to me at the hospital 18 years ago?" his face changed. Not slowly. All at once. The folder slipped from his hand. Papers scattered across the floor. I knew before he spoke. "What did you do?" I asked. He closed his eyes. "Helen, what did you do?" He sat down as if his legs had failed him. "That night, when you were unconscious, the doctors found something." My chest tightened. "What?" "You were pregnant." The room tilted. "No." "Yes." "No, I wasn't." "You were 8 weeks along." I grabbed the edge of the desk. 8 weeks. Richard and I had not been together for months before the lake. "Adrian." My stomach turned. "What happened?" I whispered. Richard's eyes filled with tears, but his voice stayed hard. "I told the doctor you were unstable. I told them you could not make decisions. I signed papers." I stared at him. "What papers?" He looked at the floor. "There was a procedure." For a moment I could not understand the words. Then I did. Something animal came out of me. Not a scream. Not a sob. A sound I had never made before. "You had no right." His head snapped up. "No right," he said. "You brought another man's child into our marriage, and you want to talk to me about rights?" I didn't know. I knew. I knew while you slept. I knew while Daniel sat outside asking if his mother was going to die. I knew the whole world could find out that my wife had betrayed me and gotten pregnant by another man. That was still my body. And it was still my life you burned down. We stood there like two people holding knives, both bleeding, both certain the other had struck first. For years, I had thought Richard's silence was the worst thing he had done. Now I understood. Silence had only been the cover. Beneath it was a decision I had never been allowed to grieve. I hated him in that moment. I also hated myself. That is the cruelest part of betrayal. It does not leave clean lines. It makes everyone guilty of something. I walked out of the study and called Daniel. He answered on the third ring. Mom. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. Mom, what's wrong? Before I could answer, I heard noise on his end. A horn. A shout. Then the phone dropped. Daniel. No answer. 10 minutes later, his wife Claire called. Her voice was shaking. There's been an accident. Daniel had pushed a child out of the path of a delivery truck. The child survived. Daniel took the impact. By the time Richard and I reached the hospital, Claire was in the hallway with Noah, her hands covered in dried blood. Richard went straight to the surgeon. I'm his father, he said. Tell me what he needs. The doctor said Daniel had lost too much blood. He's B negative, the doctor said. We're contacting the blood bank, but a direct donor would help. Richard frowned. I'm O positive. I said, I'm O positive too. The doctor paused. He looked from Richard to me. Then he said the sentence that destroyed what was left of our family. 2 O positive parents cannot have a B negative child. The hallway went silent. Richard turned to me. I shook my head before he could speak. No, I said. No. Daniel is yours. But I saw it in his eyes. 18 years of pain rearranged itself into a new accusation. You lied from the beginning, he whispered. I didn't. The doctor looked uncomfortable. There are rare explanations, but we would need testing. Claire stepped forward. I'm B negative, she said. Take mine. They rushed her away. Richard and I stood outside the operating room like ghosts. For the first time in 18 years, he did not look cold. He looked broken. When Daniel woke up hours later, pale and covered in tubes, he asked for both of us. Richard stood beside the bed. Daniel looked at him with tears in his eyes. Dad, he whispered. I know what the doctor said. Richard's mouth trembled. Then tell me the truth. Daniel closed his eyes. I found papers when I was 17. My heart stopped. What papers? Adoption papers, he said. The room spun. Richard gripped the bed rail. Daniel turned his head toward me. Mom, I'm not Adrian's child. I'm not some secret from your affair. I could not breathe. He looked at Richard. And Dad, I'm not your blood either. Richard staggered back. Daniel's voice cracked. I was switched at birth. No one spoke. The only sound was the monitor beside him. When I found the papers, Grandpa was still alive, Daniel said. I asked him. He told me you both knew something went wrong at the hospital when I was a baby. There were 2 newborn boys. Same day. Same ward. One family disappeared before the investigation finished. I turned to Richard. He was staring at Daniel as if seeing him for the first time. Daniel continued. Grandpa said you decided not to keep searching because you were afraid of losing me. Richard whispered. My father told you that? Daniel nodded. I waited for you to tell me. You never did. I felt 18 years of secrets collapse into one room. Richard sank into the chair. I didn't know your blood type, he said. I never checked. Daniel gave a weak, sad smile. I did. That's why I knew. Claire returned, pale from donating blood. She stood in the doorway and heard the end of it. Noah, only 10 years old, looked at all of us and asked the question adults were too cowardly to ask. So who is my family? No one answered. Then Daniel lifted one trembling hand. You are, he said. The people who stay honest after the truth comes out. That broke me. Not the affair. Not the surgery. Not the blood type. That sentence. Because Daniel had spent his whole life inside a house where adults confused staying with loving, silence with strength, and performance with family. When Daniel recovered, He asked us to come to his home. Richard and I sat on the sofa like defendants. Daniel sat across from us, still thin from the hospital. "I love you both," he said. "But I will not let Noah grow up believing this is marriage." I looked down. Richard said nothing. Daniel continued. "You stayed for me. I know that. But I need you to understand something. You didn't protect me from pain. You taught me to breathe around it." Richard's eyes filled. "I thought I was keeping the family together." "You kept the picture together," Daniel said. "Not the family." That was the truth we had avoided for 18 years. A framed photograph can remain perfect while everyone inside it is falling apart. 1 month later, Richard filed for divorce. This time I did not beg. At the courthouse, he looked older than I remembered. So did I. We divided the house, the accounts, the furniture, the life we had pretended to share. Before leaving, I said, "I'm sorry." He looked at me for a long time. "For which part?" "All of it," I said. "For betraying you. For making you live with a wound you never healed. For letting Daniel grow up in the cold. And for not seeing that you were hurting until your pain became cruelty." Richard swallowed. "I'm sorry too. I never thought I would hear those words." He looked away. What I did at that hospital was wrong. I told myself I was saving us from shame. I was really trying to take back control after you made me feel powerless. For the first time in 18 years, neither of us was acting. There was no marriage left to save. Only the truth. And sometimes truth does not repair the house. It simply opens the windows so people can finally breathe. I moved into a small apartment near Daniel and Claire. Richard moved 3 towns away and started therapy. Daniel did too. Eventually, so did I. Noah still spends weekends with both of us. He calls Richard Grandpa. He calls me Grandma. Nothing about blood changed that. One Sunday, Noah asked me, "Grandma, did you and Grandpa stop loving each other?" I thought about lying. Then I remembered Daniel's words. The people who stay honest after the truth comes out. So I said, "We loved each other once. Then we hurt each other. And for a long time we didn't know how to stop hurting." Noah looked down at his toy truck. "Are you friends now?" I smiled sadly. "We're learning how to be kind." Maybe that is not the ending people want. There was no wedding renewal. No final kiss. No miracle that turned 18 years of silence into romance. But there was something better than pretending. There was release. I used to think divorce meant a family had failed. Now I know some families fail long before anyone signs papers. They fail when truth becomes too dangerous to say out loud. They fail when children are asked to live inside secrets. They fail when 2 adults choose appearances over peace. And they begin again when someone finally says, "Enough. I betrayed my husband. He betrayed my body. We both betrayed our son by making him grow up inside our unfinished war." No one in this story was innocent. But innocence is not the only path to healing. Sometimes healing begins when guilty people stop defending themselves long enough to tell the truth. 18 years ago, Richard moved out of our bedroom and called us roommates. At the time, I thought that was the worst punishment he could give me. I was wrong. The worst punishment was not sleeping alone. It was waking up every day beside a lie and calling it family. Disclaimer: this video is created for the sole purpose of entertainment. All situations, characters, and stories in this video are fictional and are built entirely using artificial intelligence technology. We hope you have a relaxing time.